Season 3 of House of the Dragon just wrapped up, and I gotta tell ya, I'm about ready for this thing to end.
I'm alive!
It's not all bad, it's just been losing me a little bit for like a while now. It sucks because we've got all the ingredients for a great show: enormous budget, giant spectacle, interwoven, intricate plot lines, and betrayal. But the thing is, I don't really care.
She summoned maesters from across the seven kingdoms.
Oh my god, I don't care!
There just aren't really characters I care about anymore. This show has all the spectacle it promised, but I found myself yawning through these enormous ship battles, dragons fighting dragons, warriors dying left and right, and I'm just like, eh. House of the Dragon feels like the guy at the party that's hung around for too long. Like, so long that another way more fun guy showed up, brought triple the beer, and already left to go get more drinks. Meanwhile, House of the Dragon sits in the corner asking to hit your vape. What made Game of Thrones so engaging were the characters as a vehicle to explore these themes in this world. You care about Jaime, so when he goes on this path to redemption, gets his hand cut off, and stops kissing his sister, it's interesting. And that's my problem here. This show has a fucking million characters, and I feel like it's trying and really struggling to reach the same ensemble feel of Game of Thrones, but I think could have really benefited from being a much more focused personal story about Rhaenyra and Alicent. Speaking of these two, I loved Millie Alcock in the first season. It was a big ask to learn a bunch of blonde character names and faces, especially with these fucking Targaryen names. Tell me which character you relate to more, the guy named Corlys Valerian or the guy named Dunk. I mean, general audiences didn't even want to call Daenerys by her name. They call her Khaleesi. So do you really think it's a good idea to hinge your story on names like Rhaenyra, Vermax, Vermithor, Cyrax, Sector, Noob Saibot, Fatality? Speaking on some of the positives, my favorite stuff this season focuses on Rhaenyra finally getting what she wanted for so long. And she's pretty bad at it. Or like, has a hard time with it at least. The episode, I think episode 3, that focuses on the transition of power, cleaning out those that are still loyal to the Hightowers, and the complicated process of untangling that mess was something we hadn't really dove into in Game of Thrones, and it was really interesting. Like, what do we do with the guy that scrubbed the last king's back? Is he gonna behave? Are you gonna behave? Are you gonna be good and loyal, back scrubber? I specifically love the dynamic between Rhaenyra and the High Septon this season. Everything he says, implying that the dragons are like this evil, carnal, primordial thing, is really cool. Almost like it's antithetical to their religion. But a big problem that I've found going into this season is I really don't like Rhaenyra. I think the story had me for a bit, but I've lost any sympathy I had for her a long time ago. And it's not that I can't follow characters that do awful things, I just don't find her super interesting. I don't know if it's the several year gaps between seasons, the overly complicated story, or what, but I'm really struggling to care with her. I used to really like Rhaenyra, felt for her being passed over as heir, and liked that she was trying to keep it together even when surrounding herself with people that keep telling her that she's a crazy person. But it gets tiring when she just uses and manipulates everyone around her to the point where none of her relationships feel genuine. You know, with Daemon, Mysaria, Jace, I don't get the sense that she cares about anyone around her, and it makes it hard to connect to. Even the scene where she's sobbing over her dead son, their relationship up until that point has been so, like, utilitarian. The show is so concerned about exploring what's going on and who's scheming about what that it doesn't have much room for human moments between this family, and that's what the whole story's supposed to be. So when she's crying over Jace, I don't know if she's mourning her son or mourning her heir. Same goes for her relationship with Daemon, which I find a little more interesting, but she's just using him as a comfort blanket and a human battering ram more than an uncle husband. The incest has really gone too far here. I think I speak for everyone when I say a little bit of incest? It's fine. But like every other relationship on this show is a family-filled fuckfest, and it's just disgusting. Ew! Ew! Oh god! Speaking of, if this show's supposed to be about Rhaenyra versus Alicent, blacks versus greens, family against family, they are really struggling to find something for Alicent to do here. So for like the 9th time, they send the most important person in the world on a solo, nonsensical quest to infiltrate enemy territory, which is like the stupidest, most dangerous shit you could have these very important figureheads doing. In this case, it's Alicent being sent to go murder her son. This is a very stupid plan for many, many reasons. Olivia Cooke is a very talented actress. I don't think anybody's gonna deny that. But so many of her scenes just feel like retreading the same emotional beats and her making very silly faces of distress at her shitty kids. She keeps doing these faces, looking like a deer in the headlights that also just caught you jerking off. Aemond is just a fucking cartoon character. I find him to be such a one-dimensional villain, like from a shitty fantasy novel. Oh, I'm a one-eyed evil dragon rider who wants to kill his brothers and take the throne for himself. Part of that could be performance. He's always doing the same, like, sneer, and the actor doesn't do much to elevate what he's given. Unlike Aemond, Aegon. I said Aemond, I meant Aegon. Do you see why this is a problem now? Is such a highlight in this show for me, and such a breath of fresh air performance-wise. I'm alive! I will say I do really like Aegon's story. It kind of plays into that subversion element that George R. R. Martin likes to do, almost like an anti-Arya story, where you think that his time hiding amongst the common folk will humble him enough to learn to be a better, less arrogant person, shift his values, and become something other than a giant prick. But instead, he shuffles around his little hood all season, slops around in the mud, and just decides, nah, I'd rather be a prick, actually. I think that's pretty funny. And that storyline culminates in one of the best scenes of the show, where he's screaming his singed balls off, and his burned face, quote-unquote resurrected zombie dragon is so fucking sick to see. The problem is, they spend all season humbling him and repressing this big, fun-to-watch personality that he's really missed throughout a lot of the show. Every other character outside of this little triangle I find to either be an uninteresting pastiche of a character from the previous series, like Larys' Littlefinger, Alice Rivers' Melisandre, Mizaria's just Shay, complete with irritating accent. Hey, you guys sure you want to let her talk to our prisoner? Do you think that's maybe kind of shady? No? Giving her a lot of time. Or they're just not really given an interesting story. This show's fucking enormous, so let's do a side character lightning round. Corlys, badass of the sea, lord of the tides, is just not doing it for me this season. He's one of those characters they keep telling you is a badass. You know, he actually gets to do some stuff on a boat this season and fucking loses. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? Like, I feel like I want to like him more than I actually do, just because he looks really cool. His sons are pretty fucking boring too. I don't like Rhaenyra, mostly because every time I see her, I think of her going, sheep stealer, no, sheep stealer, sheep stealer. And that was annoying. Sheep stealer is a pretty fucking cool dragon though. Look at that underbite. Kristen Cole, a character that feels like he's also weirdly stuck around beyond his expiration date, this season literally fumbles about until he's killed. It wasn't really a shock to me as much as it was like a relief. Like, oh, thank God, one less storyline to keep track of. Weirdly, they also do a similar thing when they drag out Otto Hightower for his messy beheading, which is kind of a weird thing. I feel like in the previous 2 seasons, these would have been really big deaths, but because their story is kind of over, it's just kind of like shrugged off. Like we're tying up loose ends far after it feels like their story's concluded. So it just doesn't hit the same. Aemond Hightower, our big bad for this season, I feel like they were on the precipice of making him really interesting, but he just never really gets there for me. His highlights include beating up a table and getting stabbed in the ass. Feels like they made him a germaphobe as like a random character trait to assign him to make him more memorable than he is. And you know what? Now that I think about it, I'm not really sure if anything was accomplished with the whole Tumbleton thing. Nobody really died other than our characters that were introduced specifically for this conflict, right? And Daemon, yeah, I'm shocked I could pull these names off the top of my head too, ends up getting away. So what did we do that whole big siege for again? A weird thing that's kind of an uphill battle is the structure of this season. It gives us what should have been the finale of season 2 in the first 2 episodes, then sets up and pays off its own season in only 4 episodes, which sounds like it should be pretty fast paced, right? But it's just not how it feels. They have the balls to give us more Harrenhal nightmare scenes with Aemond going through the same shit Daemon went through last season, you know, drinking fucking cough syrup and tripping balls in the middle of a dark castle, and it's about as interesting as it was last season. If I have to watch one more scene of a character going to Harrenhal to get a little fucking therapy session, I'm gonna go crazy. House of the Dragon, more like House of the Dragging, like dragging the plot along. Is this thing on? This show is so gray. Like in a way that Game of Thrones season 7 and 8 was gray, just muddy and looking bleh. You can almost excuse it in Thrones since, you know, winter's here and things get more bleak. But this is supposed to be high fantasy dragon time now. Let's get a fucking pop of color in there. Storylines are set up to be dropped or ignored, like maybe they'll bring up these Gold Cloak murders again, but by the time the next season drops in like 10 fucking years, will you even care? I also really like the White Wolves and their whole deal this season. Roddy the Ruin was a highlight, this guy that looks like the voice actor for Mr. Krabs. Having the final episode be a siege could have really been repetitive of something like a Blackwater or Battle of the Bastards, but they put their own spin on it and made it feel unique, mostly by roasting children alive. We're shown why handing Ulf, a drunken prick, the keys to essentially a nuclear weapon is maybe not a great idea, and I'm interested to see where that goes. I mean, he's literally fucked over everyone, and I can't imagine he intends on living the rest of his life on the run. I also appreciate them leaning more into the high fantasy elements and weird corners of Westeros. The dragon action is pretty sweet, especially when there are characters around doing interesting things. My favorite being this on-the-ground fight between Daemon, Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra. That's a new way to present dragon action we haven't seen, piloting these things around like walking beasts. So I thought it was a pretty great finale to an overall season. Rhaenyra kills the Pope and declares herself the Holy Roman Emperor, something that historically always goes well. And I'm interested to see why her telling this prophecy to the masses isn't something that ends up going down in history. Like, Daenerys doesn't know about this, so it must be kind of suppressed in some way. I think one of the most interesting aspects of the show is that idea of legacy being a fluffy version of what actually happened. Helena's story is another thing that I think is paid off tragically and feels like things are finally moving forward. I really liked her story and found it really cool how they tie in her tapestry to the show's intro. Like, history is being written as the show goes on. Doom on the horizon when you see what was on her mind right before her death. So there are some good things, but at the end of it, it just kind of feels like the same quality of a season 7 or 8 of Game of Thrones. It has this huge scope and scales and battles and fire and blood and incest, but none of the core of why I'm here, which is a collection of interesting characters. Oftentimes that subvert or challenge the tropes of a typical fantasy story. You know, we just aren't getting enough of that for me. But that's kind of the grift with this show and this season. It has a really great beginning and end, but the middle is so gooey and undercooked when it should be the meat of why we're here. So to me, it feels like this show is really just HBO cashing in on the Game of Thrones brand, trying to milk it for all it's worth before people are just completely sick of it. While the first season did a lot to win back some goodwill, in my opinion, the damage that seasons 7 and 8 did to the series is pretty irreparable. I mean, I've never seen something disappear from the zeitgeist in the way Game of Thrones did after that finale aired. It just fucking dropped off the face of the planet. I cannot imagine that they'll drag this out for another season beyond 4, so it seems like we have one more season to go to wrap this all up, which I think, yeah, it's time to pack it in. Maybe then we can look back on this whole story a little more fondly, because as we're in it now, it's a lot more lows than highs for season 3. So I hate to be a hater here, but it's only because I really liked the first season of this show, following Rhaenyra, watching the decay of Viserys, getting to know a different era of this world, that I'm pretty disappointed with where it's gone. Hopefully for the end of the story, we can lock in on Rhaenyra, kind of remind us why we cared so much about her in the first place, and, you know, watch her go nuts. Hopefully in a more satisfying way than Daenerys did. But what did you think about House of the Dragon? Are you amped for the final season that we're gonna get in 12 years? Do you think season 4 is gonna lock in, or do you think it's gonna be more of the same? Or maybe I'm stupid. Maybe you enjoyed season 3 and I'm the idiot. That's very possible. Maybe I'm just gonna be in the cage playing with my bugs. Thank you so much. Subscribe, check out my other stuff, and I'll see you next time. Are you fucking kidding me?